There is a silence that feels heavier than any argument or goodbye. It is the space between two people who once shared emotions, conversations, and a deep connection, but now there is nothing. No messages, no calls, no signs, only memories of what once existed. You keep checking your phone, wondering if they will finally break the silence. But they don't. You stay quiet too. At first, it feels painful. It feels like something meaningful has disappeared. You replay old conversations, searching for answers and wondering where everything changed. You start questioning yourself. Did you do enough? Did you care too much? Were you the only one who felt the connection? Slowly, your mind creates painful explanations and makes you wonder if they ever truly cared. But then something begins to shift, because silence is not always the end. Sometimes silence is where transformation begins. When an avoidant person and you stop contacting each other, it is not just a pause in communication. It becomes a moment where both people are forced to face emotions, fears, and patterns they have been avoiding. When the noise disappears, the truth becomes clearer. For an avoidant, silence can feel like protection. It is how they create distance when emotions become overwhelming. It often comes from deep fears of losing freedom, feeling trapped, or getting hurt by someone they care about. But silence can also become a teacher. When you stop reaching out, they no longer have someone to pull away from. They are left alone with their thoughts, emotions, and the feelings they tried to avoid. And that is where the inner struggle begins. For you, silence may feel like rejection, but sometimes it is not rejection. Sometimes it is redirection. It is a reminder that you cannot keep losing yourself while trying to convince someone else to choose you. Growth happens in stillness. It happens when you finally have space to hear yourself again. When both of you stop contacting each other, the entire dynamic changes. The avoidant begins feeling the absence of what they once had. You begin seeing the patterns that kept you emotionally stuck. Both of you start facing the fears and defenses that prevented true closeness. This is not about punishment or forcing someone to return. It is about awareness, healing, and growth. At first, the avoidant may feel relief. The pressure is gone. The expectations disappear. They may think, "This is what I needed. I finally have space." But that feeling often does not last, because avoiding emotions is not the same as finding peace. Buried feelings eventually return. Without your messages, your attention, and your effort, they are left alone with emotions they normally push away. Questions begin appearing. Did I walk away from something real? Why am I still thinking about them? Why does this distance feel different? Avoidance does not always mean a person feels nothing. Sometimes people run because caring feels overwhelming. When you stop chasing, they lose the distance that helped them feel in control. They may distract themselves with work, hobbies, or other things, but eventually the silence becomes difficult to ignore. They remember your voice, your laugh, your conversations, and the way you understood them. Most importantly, they remember how you saw them. You did not only see the person they showed the world. You saw the fears and emotions hidden behind their walls. For someone who has spent years protecting themselves, being truly seen can feel both comforting and frightening. In your absence, they are left with the reality they avoided, and sometimes they realize the problem was never that you were not enough. The problem was that they were afraid of what genuine closeness required from them. Meanwhile, something powerful begins happening inside you. At first, you may feel anxious. You may want to reach out, fix things, or try harder. But slowly, you begin realizing how much energy you spent trying to earn love that should have been freely given. You understand that chasing reassurance was not creating connection. It was creating exhaustion. Sometimes what felt like love was actually fear. Fear of losing them. Fear of not being enough. Fear that if you stopped trying, they would leave. But when you stop feeding that cycle, healing begins. You return your attention to yourself. You remember who you were before their distance consumed your thoughts. You understand that your worth was never based on their ability to show up. That is not losing attachment. That is finding yourself again. And this shift is often what changes how an avoidant experiences you. When the pressure disappears and the chasing stops, they may finally have the space to recognize what they truly feel. They begin noticing the difference between your presence and your absence. The silence becomes a teacher. For them, it reveals what they were afraid to face. For you, it restores the power you gave away. Eventually, the quiet becomes louder. Many avoidant people learn to disconnect before they can feel pain. They shut down emotions to protect themselves. But emotional numbness is not healing. When someone who once brought warmth, understanding, and safety becomes distant, memories and feelings often return. They begin noticing the space where your presence used to be. They may realize your love was not pressure, it was connection, it was care, it was something they did not know how to fully receive. This creates an internal battle between fear and desire. They may want to reconnect, but their defenses tell them to stay away. They may write messages and delete them. They may check your updates silently. They may think about you during quiet moments, not because you are haunting them, but because you represented something real, and real connections are not easy to forget. When an avoidant and their partner stop contacting each other, it does not always mean emotions disappear. Sometimes it means emotions finally become impossible to ignore. For them, silence reveals what they pushed away. For you, silence reminds you what you deserve. The balance begins to shift. For a long time, you may have been the one reaching out, seeking answers, repairing the connection, and waiting for signs. One person was pursuing, the other was retreating. But when you stop, the pattern breaks. You stop convincing, you stop proving, you stop chasing. Not to manipulate them, but to protect yourself. You are no longer saying, I will do anything to keep you. You are saying, I will not lose myself while loving you. And that changes everything. The avoidant begins noticing that something feels different. The comfort of knowing you would always be there is no longer the same. Questions begin forming. Why are they not reaching out? Have they moved on? Did I underestimate their importance? Their old pattern no longer works. They have to experience the reality of their choices. Sometimes they reach out, sometimes they do not. But internally, something has changed. The silence has created awareness. It has balanced a connection that was once one-sided. Because love cannot grow when one person is always pursuing and the other is always escaping. Real connection requires two people willing to meet each other. And sometimes, silence becomes the place where both people finally understand that. You begin returning to yourself. They begin facing themselves. And in that space, both people have the opportunity to grow into something healthier, deeper, and more honest. That's not revenge. That's restoration. It is the moment when the energy you once gave away slowly begins returning to you. There comes a point, not immediately but eventually, when the avoidant begins noticing that something feels different. It is not only the missing messages, the calls, or hearing your voice. What they feel is the absence of your presence, the steady support, the patience, and the quiet reassurance that said, I'm here even when you are struggling to let me in. They may not have fully valued it while they had it because, for an avoidant, consistency can sometimes feel like pressure. But when that consistency disappears, they begin recognizing the difference between peace and emptiness. In the early days of no contact, they may convince themselves they are fine. They stay busy, focus on distractions, and tell themselves they never truly needed the connection. But human connection is not only logical, it is emotional. Your words, your kindness, your presence, and the way you made them feel became part of their world. When that suddenly disappears, they often notice the change before they fully understand it. They may feel restless. They may feel unsettled. They may sense that something is missing. Then one day, during an ordinary moment, it hits them. There is an empty space where your energy used to be. The silence that once felt peaceful begins feeling different. It no longer feels like freedom. It starts feeling like loss. And that is when the truth begins to appear. They did not escape pressure. They lost connection. For many avoidant people, closeness feels dangerous because it brings up old fears. They may have learned that love means losing control, feeling trapped, or being hurt. So they create distance. Distance becomes their protection. But love does not chase forever. A person can offer patience, understanding, and compassion. But eventually, they must also choose themselves. When you stop reaching out, the same walls that once protected them can begin creating isolation. They start missing the way you understood them without judgment. They miss the patience you showed. They miss the way you gave them space while still caring. Because avoiding connection does not mean someone stops needing it. It only means they are trying not to admit it. But ignoring emotions does not erase them. It only delays the moment when they must face them. In the quiet, those feelings often become louder. They may replay old conversations. They may remember moments they ignored. They may wonder if they handled things differently. Would the outcome have changed? That is the strange thing about distance. Sometimes it creates the reflection a person was avoiding. Meanwhile, something powerful begins happening within you. The absence starts bringing clarity. You begin realizing your worth was never dependent on how someone received your love. You stop searching for small signs of affection because you understand you deserve consistency. You realize silence is not always abandonment. Sometimes it is the path back to yourself. Slowly, your life becomes calmer. You sleep better. You smile more. You stop living in uncertainty, waiting for the next message or wondering where you stand. You begin feeling like yourself again. And that change creates a shift. Even if the avoidant does not say anything, they may sense that something about you is different. Your energy no longer says, "I need you." It says, "I choose my peace." That is when curiosity may begin. They start wondering, are they moving forward? Do they still think about me? Are they happier without me? That curiosity can slowly become longing, not because they suddenly changed overnight, but because they begin seeing the difference between having your presence and living without it. They may try to find that same feeling somewhere else, but some connections cannot simply be replaced, because what made your bond special was not only attraction, it was emotional safety, it was feeling understood, it was feeling seen. And something genuine is not easily recreated. It can only be remembered. When you stop contacting an avoidant, you do more than remove your presence. You remove the emotional reflection they receive from you. You are someone who saw their hidden fears, their potential, and the parts of themselves they struggled to accept. When that reflection disappears, they may begin questioning what they lost. They may call it confusion, they may call it curiosity, but deep down, it can become the beginning of awareness. The realization that love was never about losing themselves. It was about learning how to connect without fear. So yes, when communication ends, they may feel your absence. Not always immediately, not always dramatically, but meaningful connections often leave an imprint. And real connections do not simply disappear, they transform. But something equally important happens within you. At first, silence may feel like loss, but often it is emotional recovery. You are not only attached to the person, you are attached to the cycle, the waiting, the uncertainty, the hope, the constant need for reassurance. Sometimes you mistake intensity for intimacy, you mistake inconsistency for passion, you mistake confusion for depth. But when the cycle ends, your mind and body finally have space to heal. At first, peace may feel uncomfortable because your nervous system became familiar with chaos, but slowly you discover something important. Peace was never boring. It was simply unfamiliar. And that is where healing begins. You start realizing that what you called love was sometimes survival. You were trying to earn connection by giving more, analyzing more, and trying harder. You confused effort with worth, but silence teaches you something powerful. Love should never require you to abandon yourself. You begin shifting from attachment to alignment. Instead of asking, "Why didn't they choose me?" you begin asking, "Why did I keep choosing someone who could not meet me fully?" That question changes everything. Healing is not about blaming them. It is about understanding yourself. You begin noticing your patterns, the way you checked your phone constantly, the way your mood depended on their response, the way you accepted uncertainty because you feared losing them. You realize you were searching for safety in a place that could not provide it. And now you are learning something different. You focus on your peace, your goals, your confidence, your self-respect. You stop spending your energy trying to convince someone to choose you. Instead, you invest that energy into becoming someone you are proud of. You move from reacting to creating, from needing closure to becoming your own closure. And then something beautiful happens. You no longer need their validation to feel valuable. Their silence no longer controls your emotions. You feel whole again, not because they returned, but because you returned to yourself. That is true alignment. It is when your energy no longer chases. It attracts. It is when you stop searching for someone to complete you because you have learned how to stand complete on your own. And ironically, this is often when an avoidant may begin feeling the strongest pull toward you, because grounded energy feels different. When you are no longer desperate for their attention, your presence feels safer. The same emotional closeness they once feared may begin feeling comforting because it no longer comes from pressure. It comes from choice. That is why silence can be such a powerful teacher. It removes illusions. It reveals patterns. It brings both people face to face with the truth. You were never losing yourself because someone left. You are rediscovering yourself because you stop chasing. You stop asking what they are thinking and start asking what you are creating. You stop replaying the past and begin building your future. And one day, you look back and realize something. The silence that once felt like it broke you was actually the silence that rebuilt you. Because losing contact did not destroy you. It revealed who you truly are when the noise disappears and healing begins. There comes a moment when silence becomes long enough that the truth finally appears. It shows up in quiet moments, in memories, and in the spaces where distractions no longer work. You did not lose them because you were not enough. You lost them because they were not ready. When communication ends and everything becomes still, something powerful begins to happen. The silence that once felt painful slowly becomes a teacher. For the avoidant, silence becomes a mirror. It reflects the emotions and fears they spent years avoiding. They may have believed distance was peace, but true peace does not come from running away. It comes from facing what is hidden inside. Over time, they may realize the walls they built for protection also created loneliness. The emptiness they feel is not freedom. It is a message that something needs to change. They begin questioning their patterns. Why do they pull away when someone gets close? Why does love feel overwhelming? Why do they run from the connection they secretly want? Because avoidance usually has deeper roots. Past experiences, fears, and moments where love became connected with pain can shape how someone responds to closeness. And in the silence, those hidden emotions begin to surface. Real change does not begin with promises or dramatic actions. It begins with awareness. They start understanding that the love they pushed away was never trying to control them. It was trying to reach them. But this transformation is not only about them, it is about you too. For you, silence becomes a chance to reconnect with yourself. The part of you that was constantly waiting, overthinking, and searching for answers finally begins to relax. You start feeling your own energy return, and you realize something important. You were not only chasing love, you were chasing safety. You were trying to prove your worth through patience, effort, and endless understanding. But silence teaches you that love should never require you to lose yourself. You stop asking, why didn't they choose me? And you begin asking, why did I keep choosing something that could not fully meet me? That question changes everything. Healing is not about blaming them. It is about understanding yourself. You begin seeing the moments when you ignored your own needs, depended on their attention, or accepted uncertainty because you feared losing them. Slowly, you return to yourself. You stop waiting for someone else to give you closure. You create your own closure. The relationship becomes not only a loss, but a lesson. The silence teaches you boundaries, self-respect, patience, and emotional strength. You stop chasing. You stop proving. You stop trying to convince someone of your value. Instead, you begin choosing peace. And that is when your energy changes. You no longer crave what constantly hurt you. You no longer need someone else's presence to feel complete. You become whole again, not because they came back, because you came back to yourself. That is true transformation. It happens when your worth is no longer controlled by someone else's actions, when your peace no longer depends on whether they respond, return, or finally understand. The silence becomes a lesson for both people. For them, it reveals that avoidance is not safety, it is separation. For you, it reveals that love cannot grow where self-worth is sacrificed. Some avoidants may return, some may stay silent, some may grow, and others may repeat old patterns. But your healing cannot depend on what they choose. Your healing depends on what you choose. The silence was never meant to punish you. It was meant to prepare you. It removed the distractions so you could rediscover your strength, your identity, and your truth. When contact ends, many people believe everything is over, but sometimes endings are not destruction. Sometimes they are redirection. Sometimes life removes what keeps you stuck so you can rebuild something stronger. The hardest part is not the silence itself. It is accepting what the silence is teaching you. You were never meant to rescue someone who was not ready to face themselves. You were meant to return home to yourself. The love you gave was not wasted. Every lesson, every difficult moment, and every tear helped create your growth. And eventually, the avoidant may begin noticing the space where your presence used to be. They may understand the difference between being alone and feeling lonely, between peace and emptiness, because your absence speaks a language your words never could, the language of self-respect. It says, I will not lose myself just to keep someone close. And that is when you move from attachment into awareness. You stop seeing yourself as abandoned. You start seeing yourself as transformed. You forgive not because they deserve it, but because you deserve freedom. You release them, not with anger, but with acceptance, because their fear was never your responsibility to fix. You cannot heal someone by destroying yourself beside them. You heal by choosing yourself. So when an avoidant and you stop contacting each other, do not only see it as an ending, see it as a turning point. You are not abandoned. You are being redirected. You are not rejected. You are being refined. One day you will look back and realize the silence that once hurt you was the same silence that rebuilt you. It was never only about losing someone. It was about finding yourself. Remember, silence is not always the end. Sometimes it is the beginning of your transformation. Do not chase what walked away. Do not beg for what cannot meet you. Choose yourself, because you are not defined by who leaves. You are defined by how you rise afterward.